was pre-diabetic, reversed that. I had an overactive thyroid, reversed that. I had hair like falling off chunks, reversed that. I had cystic acne all over my face, reversed that. So men and women are both having hormonal issues, but women at 10 times higher rates than men because society functions in a 24-hour schedule and we function on a 28-day schedule. You know, I'm feeling so bloated today, like I'm getting my period soon. And the other girlfriend says, oh, me too. Boom, just normalize it. All my friends have it. Actually, this is the result of an imbalance. Those receipts are a huge problem. It immediately transfers into your skin and you absorb it. It's very fast. And the exposure is from one receipt is insane. It went from, I don't want to get pregnant, let me use the pill, to let me start giving the pill to everyone who has any complaint about their cycle. It became a standard medication for that when it was never meant to be used for that.
Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of the Extrospective podcast with your host Zach Villeneuve-Snell. In this week's episode, I am joined by Dr. Maria Tedim, who is an expert in women's hormonal health and reproductive biology. In this episode, we take you through what the menstrual cycle actually is, how schools have done such a terrible job at educating both boys and girls on what it is and how it affects us, how our environment is destroying our body's ability to naturally regulate our hormone cycles, particularly, of course, with a focus on women, how the modern world itself, in the way it's set up with work and pressures on women, can also have an effect on this. And finally, why you shouldn't touch receipts, drink tap water, or take hormonal birth control. Estrogen is everywhere, and microplastics are ruining our hormones, and Maria goes into a bit of detail as to why that is. She also sheds light on what men can do if you're like me, with women around you and a girlfriend, and how to support them through it in a loving, graceful, and encouraging way. Look, this is a topic that I've been fascinated by for a while. I think it's something that people don't talk about enough. There's weird levels of shame and fear and embarrassment when talking about it. And I don't see any reason why. It's not something that we should be keeping in the dark. In fact, because of the lack of education and just how important it is for women to know what's going on with their body and how to work with their body rather than against it in a world which is working against everyone in general, this kind of a conversation is probably one of the more important ones to have. So I really hope you enjoy the expertise of Dr. Maria Tedim. Dr. Maria Tedim, welcome to the Extrospective podcast. How are you doing?
I'm so good. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
If I was to ask you the question, who is Dr. Maria Tedim, how would you answer?
I am someone who is specialized into women's hormone health, okay? And what does that mean and entail is I just take women that are struggling with hormonal imbalances, such as, PMS, PMDD, PCOS, even fertility issues, and I help them regain their health back so that they can understand that it's not static. You can reverse those issues so that you can feel energized again. You can feel like you have your confidence back, that you love your body again, because we definitely have history of fighting against our bodies almost every day, but also bring other aspects that we definitely have within us, which is like this aspect of youthfulness that we can keep for much longer than we think that we can. Also preserving our fertility. We don't have a timeline. It's not as simple as that. And just really helping women be in their full potential by removing the root cause, which is like all of these weird hormonal imbalances that are making them feel like their body's against them. So that's me right now. Obviously, apart from that, I am someone who loves to do agriculture. I love to grow my own veggies. And I'm very into crime documentaries and some fun facts like that.
And what I find interesting is before we started recording, you said you hadn't been interviewed by any guys on this topic, or actually guys are quite uneducated. But what you're alluding to there is that it's actually women as well who don't know much about their cycle syncing, about their hormonal levels throughout the month and over time. Has that been something that surprised you as you've stepped into more of that work, just the lack of education that there is even for women with their own bodies?
So it surprised me and it didn't surprise me, because as a woman myself, I didn't know any of the things that I'm teaching today up to like 7 years ago. So I lived a long time not even knowing anything about my cycle. And I was in medicine for so long. I was in oncology for so long, and I had no clue of how my own body kind of functioned. But then going into it, what really surprised me was how much we normalized when it comes to our cycles, and that we kind of just decided that it was going to be a bad thing for us, and it brings, pain, sadness, mood swings. It makes us feel like we're out of control, and we normalize all of these horrendous things about our cycle when it's meant to be exactly the opposite. It's meant to be such an emphasis of different skills. Is meant to be a time where we can really move our goals forward, because every single week of our cycle highlights different parts of our brains, which it does not happen to men. So we do have men very different ways of functioning to get to the same place. And I think now it's time for us as a society to decide that we're not all in the same box functioning the same way, but we have to okay, we have a different brain. We need to start doing things differently so that we have less resistance going to the same goal that, most men also want. Because now we're both wanting the same thing all the time. But so yeah, it was surprising, but it wasn't surprising at the same time.
Working with your body as opposed to against it. And I think it's important, before we get into the technicalities of some of the things that you share online and some of the work that you've been doing more recently, to embed this podcast within your own journey, because I think naturally there is often quite a significant reason why people get so led into going down one particular career path is because they've had their own experience and journey through things. And a question I always ask on all the podcasts, which I'll continue to do so, is what were you like as a child? What were you like as a kid?
I was very funny and creative along the way, because I would say childhood trauma. So the way people interact with me, some of the things the parents do, it got me into being a super shy person who resorted to food to feel better, who had anorexia and binging disorders later on. So actually that was what led me to the path of medicine, was my own struggles with my body, especially from the age of 11 to 18. It was very intense for me. And it's a time where it's like formative years, right? We are growing to the bodies that we have. We are forming conclusions about ourselves. And all of it was negative, to be honest, like all of it. And um, I only was able to bring that side of me that was like a fun, bubbly, confident person in my late 20s, because of now finding that I can heal these issues. This is not my definition of who I am. Like I'm not labeling myself with all of the negative things I see. I'm actually the opposite. And being able to heal that with obviously health strategies, lifestyle strategies, but also working on the childhood trauma was what got me here in this position where I'm thriving.
Like, it's as much psychological as it is physiological, I
Oh
suppose.
yeah.
So grounding it in the uh, the childhood journey, what the things that you begin to believe about yourself, and obviously you've mentioned there, your journey with eating disorders. What was that like, going through that journey, and what did that teach you about yourself when you were in that stage of your life?
What a deep question that is. I think that when you're in it, it's truly a black hole. Like you are, you're not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Um, and my hormonal issues started because of that moment where someone told me something about my body at 11 years old, and I decided that I was no longer going to eat. And so my period actually only came to me when I was almost 17, and usually we get it around 12. So I did have a huge timeline of not having a cycle when my body wanted to have a cycle, and when I got it, it was just terrible. It was like years of accumulating like the pressure, and then the lid burst. It was something like that. But I think what I take from that is, if we start teaching like young women when they're in high school or even earlier, the moment that they're about to start changing or transitioning into puberty and going into their cycles, if we start telling them like, okay, you're in a very, very important timeline of your life, like you're 11 years old, 12 years old, you're about to completely change your biology, and you're going from like a static human being to a cyclical human being. What does this mean for you mentally, for your education, for how you want to behave, for how you want to eat and exercise? What does that mean for you? How can you start adapting and having that as a proper course? Like, where both men and women understand this. Because when men get together with a female, they're going to go through it too if everything's dysregulated. They're not going to find it fun, and they're going to be like, why are women always sick? Why are women always mad? Why are women always going through all of these issues? If we started like from the beginning, age 11, 12, I bet you that none of this will be a problem.
All I can remember from science lessons at that time is a very brief biological chart of the 28-day cycle, and you see follicular phase, ovulation, luteal phase, and everything, FSH and LH, whatever the other one is. See, I'm even exposing my lack of knowledge here, and you can see this chart going along, and that was probably one or two lessons when I was like 13, and I don't know how much education there is that's holistic and actually understanding and working with, as opposed to a theoretical lesson that children get. So that you said that was the catalyst that led you into medicine, is
Yeah.
wanting to understand more about reproductive biology in some sense, because you'd had that experience yourself where it was at 17 that you started your menstrual cycle and it all kind of happened at
Yeah, it
once.
went downhill from there. I think that my desire to wanting to be in medicine was always there. Like I was always saying, like I'm going to be a marine biologist when I'm older, and then that went into I want to be a scientist when I'm older, and then that desire was there, and so I naturally transitioned into medicine. But what really got me to the place that I am right now, and not in a pharmaceutical company selling drugs, for example, was I was at the peak of my career doing my PhD in oncology, and I never felt like that. I feel like I hit rock bottom with my health. I honestly, like, I would read a sentence and I just couldn't remember it right away. I would wake up full of pain in my body. I literally would sit in the bus going to the lab, and I would like hope that the day would be over. Like, I really hit rock bottom because I had so much inflammation. I had so many hormonal imbalances. My gut health was destroyed. Of course, I have no brain health. I have no energy. I have nothing. And I needed all of that to have like successful time in my PhD, right? And that kind of was the moment that woke me up to there needs to be more than this. Like, there's no way my life is going to look like this for the rest of my life. There's no way I can allow myself to feel this way. But you know what the problem was? Everyone around me was feeling the same way. So I normalized that once again. And then suddenly in one of my classes, I was listening to my professor talk about like a potential route for cancer treatment. And in that moment, like this seed came to me, like dropped in my brain. And it told me, like, you've been in medicine for like over 10 years at this point. You've never heard about cancer prevention. It's only been about treatment. And that was like, interesting thought. I brushed it off. And then, as I like to say, the universe finds its ways to give you exactly what you need from that moment on. And I found this article that was talking about how you can completely prevent cancer with nutrition. And as a, I would say, oncology expert in that moment, I was like, food affects genes? Which was so, thinking about it, that's insane that I had no idea what nutrition does to the body in that timeline, like 10 years into medicine, focusing on oncology, focusing on reproductive disorders. I had no idea that food could change our biology. Just in one single meal, it can change more than 300 genes. So that was like a mind-blowing moment. And I think in that moment, I decided that I was going to leave the pharma world, the Western medicine thinking, and I was going to start investigating what preventive medicine was. Like, what can that give me? And by doing that, guess what? I was pre-diabetic, reversed that. I had an overactive thyroid, reversed that. I had hair like falling off chunks, reversed that. I had cystic acne all over my face, reversed that. So of course, that was my journey into getting to the point that I am today. That the only reason why I'm teaching this is because I know what's possible for every single woman out there. I've been through that. And also understanding that we're not meant to have disease. It's really, I would say 95% of what we have is man-made. And we can definitely reverse almost anything.
How long was that reversal process? And are there any particular drastic changes that you can attribute that
Yeah.
reversal to?
So I decided, because of the research that I had done, that if I went plant-based, I could have quickly healed. And so I went plant-based mostly. That was the only thing I focused in the beginning. And within 6 months, I had all of these issues gone. So it was a very quick way of bringing back stability to the body. However, it took longer to feel the way I feel today. So if you would talk to me like in that moment where I had been plant-based for 6 months, I would have been like, I feel like I'm on top of the world because I didn't know that feeling before. So maybe that was like 70% of what I feel today. But that 70% was everything for me because I couldn't even think on a day to day. Now I'm like, I would say like 97% because there's always like life is stressful. So we have to deal with things. And it took me more time to get here. And that came with, healing emotional wounds, making sure that my lifestyle was on check, like exercise, stress release, environmental toxins being not in abundance in my environment. So it took me like 6 months to reverse all of that, but then it took me like 3 more years to feel the way I feel right now. And then I kept it after that because again, it's about a lot of practice.
And of course, I want to get into that a little bit more and understand more of the specific environmental factors that we do inherit in our environment growing up that, it only takes a dramatic moment to then begin to question those things. I do want to ask about that. But I also want to ask for you personally, you mentioned the phases on your website of what you went through in terms of your career journey. And you said you had the not so rainbow and butterflies phase where you were mourning the career that you'd prepare for and going through the ups and downs of creating a new one. So how did that feel when you were beginning to, you've invested 10 years into what you're going into, and then actually suddenly you're changing what the direction you might go in?
I honestly love that you're asking me that question because that in itself was like I had to like almost reincarnate into someone different. That was a lot of grieving, a lot of letting go because I had decided for a long time that I was going to be the scientist that found the cure for cancer. And I already had jobs lined up to work with different pharmaceutical companies to continue that work. And so in the middle of that PhD, I had that decision like this no longer serves me. This goes against what I believe it's possible, which is to heal. And so when I finished my PhD, actually, almost the whole entire year after that, I was so lost. I was like, how do I even get started? Like, what do I do now? Do I work for myself? Do I work for someone else? Do I go in a clinic? And it took me just time of figuring that out. And I decided that for sure I was going to start just working with people that had chronic issues and help them reverse that. But you know what's interesting, and this is going to lead us to what I do today, is I started working with men and women in preventing issues. So like very much nutrition, exercise, stress management, what I knew back then. And what I saw was men had a rapid, like it was almost like this, like in a line, all the way up in terms of results. It would always they would have momentum. That's the perfect word. They would have momentum with everything that they did. And with the women that I worked with the same protocol, they would really go like up and down, up and down. It was never stable. They plateaued a lot in the results. And I was finding that confusing. But then again, like that light bulb moment, I am a scientist at heart. Why is this happening? And it's very, very obvious. And this is when I was like, okay, Maria, like get your scientist hat on and try to figure it out. And it was very clear that everything that I was teaching from whatever clinical study I had that information from or whatever journal that I took it, I started looking at the cohort study, who was part of that study, men and postmenopausal women, never women within their fertile years, which means from the age of 11 to maybe 50. All of us aren't not included in these studies. And so because of that, it doesn't work for us because our cycle has everything to do with our results. And this was when I went from preventive medicine to female focused preventive medicine, which changed a lot. That's how I got here.
What is it about the way that we're living in modern society that is damaging to our health and our hormones, specifically for women?
Yeah. So it is damaging for everyone the way that we are living, just because we've decided that we are all going to focus on go, go, go energy and never restore. And just like in nature, everything is a cycle of like giving the fruit, and then it's time to restore so you can give the fruit again. So we are the same. And so men and women are both having hormonal issues, but women at 10 times higher rates than men, because society functions in a 24-hour schedule and we function on a 28-day schedule. So when we try to fit into this day-to-day that is the same, so kind of eating the same, exercising the same, working the same, never changing our habits to accommodate the cycle, then the cycle goes against us and we start to get more autoimmune issues, more of this crazy hormonal imbalances such as PMDD, which is more like a mental health disorder that gets women to feel like they need to end their lives at the end when they get close to their period. So there's two big things. So too much emphasis on just working, pushing, being successful that way, and not thinking that resting and being happy is part of it. That's ruining us completely. Then there's this other part where society is still very much a 24-hour schedule type of thing. Now, where I see things changing is for the women who go onto having their own businesses and they have control over their schedules, and they can really change and orient their tasks and orient their day-to-day based on where they are in their cycle and have success that way and feel nourished and fulfilled and balanced and energized throughout the whole month rather than just 2 weeks. Because, for example, most of my clients are very high performing women, lawyers, corporate managers, and they are working nonstop. They wake up early, they go to bed late, they forget to eat. You can see where this is going. So they feel properly okay. They feel like they have juice and energy the first 2 weeks of their cycle. As soon as they start hitting the last 2 weeks, this is when everything goes to shite. This is when everything starts working against them, because the second half of our cycle as women, and everyone needs to know that, is when we need to take more care and consideration to what the body needs, because we have a hormone called progesterone, which is very sensitive. It's like a super sensitive, shy little girl, and she needs to be taken care well, needs to feel safe for her to show up. And with the lifestyle that we have, that we don't even know how to adapt, progesterone doesn't show up, and that gives us horrible effects in the second phase of the cycle.
And I've heard people say before online that how you look after your body in um in the week or two leading up to menstruation really affects then how you feel during your period and into the rest, reset and go again.
Yeah,
And if you do kind of, I guess, smash through the days and ignore the natural signals that your body is giving you to rest and look after yourself a little bit more, like you said, like feeling safe and resting more, then it just spirals into the next phase and then you feel worse during that phase. Is that correct?
yeah, that's totally correct. Like, for example, um, actually, let me address what you just said first, which is, if there's one thing that any woman who's listening is, if you want to start anywhere, start looking at that phase that you talked about, the luteal phase, which is the phase just right before you bleed. Those 14 to 10 days where you really need to look at nutrition for your cycle then, which can really help you have a great luteal phase. It can help you have a great period, but also look at like not pushing intensively with like high intensity workouts and maybe going a little bit more for like weightlifting. It's really learning about what does that phase of the cycle need. And if you start with that, you'll see tremendous results within like maybe 2 to 3 cycles of just repeating the same behaviors. But then there's another thing that I wanted to say, which was, oh yeah, going back to, I wanted to actually, something that you said sparked an idea, which was the reason why like most, diets don't work for women. Like, for example, if someone wants to be keto for a while, it will work for the first 2 weeks of the cycle, but it won't work for the last two. And this is why, like, every time I see a health recommendation from a health expert, it's for the male body. Like, you cannot sustain most things every single day for months and months and months on end. What you can do is an adaptation of that expertise or that health advice, which is, if you want to go keto, then you adapt it to your cycle. Do it when you can, stop it when you can. If you want to go plant-based, do the same thing. If you want to go whatever, do the same thing. Again, if you're like a high performance athlete, like, actually where we see the most cycle issues is with these women, high performing athletes, because they push nonstop. And something that has been beautiful to see is like actually the US soccer team, they're now starting to have training according to their cycle and they're performing better. So that's just an example of what even in sports things need to change, which is difficult because again, it's hard to adapt in a world that has been made a specific way, but little by little we'll get there. But it's everything is about doing it for the cycle and seeing that as a superpower, because when you tap into it, this is when all of your desires come true. Like people are always asking me like, how do you have so much energy? It's like, because I make sure that I don't screw up my cycle. I make sure that I don't go against what I need to do to keep the energy. The moment that you make a decision that goes against your hormones, that energy is like gone. And so this is why again it needs to start early, because women feel very overwhelmed at this age to start changing things. And at the age of 11, we have so much plasticity. The brain is still developing. It's easy to incorporate these things and it's easy to change them. And it's easy to like, okay, let me try. And like there's trial and error for you to have with your period for like 5 years. And then by the time that you hit your 20, you're a master at this. So a big part of what I would desire to do would be to incorporate this in school somehow. So hopefully I'm manifesting that.
Yeah, do you think? I mean, I've got two questions, but off the back of what you just said at the end there, do you think it's overwhelming for women to look to begin to change these things because it's difficult to let go of what they've become familiar with?
Yeah.
Because I think there's an element of, especially in a world, for example, as you've said, like people who are high power, like strong in their career and driven and focused, and they want to work and achieve and all this kind of stuff. Do you think that there's like an element of worry that by taking not a step back, but kind of readjusting how they live week to week, more in sync with their cycle, is going to um, kind of hold them back from being able to work just as I guess men do in that high paced environment where they can just go day to day.
Yeah,
Do you think there's like a fear that they're going to lose out somehow?
for sure. I've heard this from their mouth. So it's just, and they're right. It will be probably used against us, especially in bigger corporations. It can be like, oh, then, if you have to adapt, then I can just go hire men. You know what I mean? Something like that. Um, so I do think that it's the way that companies need to look at their systems in place that need to change, because at the end of the day, what you desire from a person to get results for your company is their brain and their capacity to function, their energy. So you want to maximize that for both sex. So why not have a system in place where men can decide how they work and produce work the way they want to, as long as the result is X, Y, and Z, and women can do the same as long as the result is X, Y, and Z. The problem is we're too focused in the way that we're not seeing how that can be easy to transform within a corporation or a company or a business. We're not seeing how that can actually be so simple to switch, because we're too focused on like, oh no, it needs to be different, it's going to be too much work. Yes, it's true that there's going to be a learning curve because women need to learn about their bodies anyway, but at the end of the day, the results will be better because the women will be happier, they'll be producing work better, and men will also be happier because the environment is better. um, yeah, I think that it would be, I never thought about it this way, but if I would have to present it to a company, I would have to like really, in a very ingenious way, to tell them why this is the best thing for the company. But for sure, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge in the beginning. Just like with everything, with any change, it always brings resistance, and that's okay because great things always have resistance.
And I think it's worth addressing in this context because we've kind of obviously spoken about different elements of the menstrual cycle and different kind of ways in which you'd want to respond. But particularly, I think it might be helpful just to go through. And I know it's different for every individual, but for each sort of phase, and I know it can be split up into 3 or 4 depending on what kind of model you're following. But for each phase, generally, how you should be. Um, Approaching the day and setting up your lifestyle, and also then what you should expect to feel through doing that. I think that would be helpful just to outline, and then maybe I can ask any questions that pop up from that.
Okay. So I like to divide the menstrual cycle into two specific phases because at the end of the day is what is your hormones doing to your brain. Whatever they're doing to your brain is going to change your desires of how you want to do things, who you're attracted to, how you want to work, what skill you have highlighted. So it's really just about learning that, and it's easy to divide it in two just because we have two main hormones that determine what's happening in the brain. So that's estrogen and progesterone. The first phase of the cycle, the follicular and ovulatory phase, so those 14 days, let's say, those first 14 days after you stop bleeding, estrogen is predominant in the brain. And estrogen is a hormone that just makes everything lovey dovey, makes everything amazing. It makes everything like everything is working in your favor. And so in that phase, your brain is great at doing complex processing tasks. It's great at brainstorming. It's great with creativity. You are a fantastic communicator. You express yourself well. You're more attractive to everyone else because of estrogen. So, for example, going on first dates is a great opportunity in this phase. So that's the first phase. It's about high energy, socializing, communicating, using brainstorming, creativity for whatever you do in life. In the second phase, however, progesterone now dominates the brain. And progesterone has a really focusing inward energy effect. So it calms everything down and it brings the attention to you instead of outward. So first phase of the cycle is outward energy. Second phase is inward energy. This doesn't mean you're tired. This just means that you're no longer feeling like you have the need of putting your energy out and you want to use it for yourself. And so when it comes to actual working, what progesterone does to the brain is that it makes you super focused on like minute detail things. So you want to take time for like doing things that you've been ignoring the whole cycle that you don't want to do, such as like a report, or maybe if you're a writer, like editing and proofreading, which like demands detailed focus, etc., etc. And for feelings, you really want to start like nourishing and taking care of yourself and listening to what the body is bringing in terms of emotions, because there's something fantastic about the menstrual cycle, which is the way that it is built emotionally is perfect to get you going always every month and always course correcting what's not working. And let me specify this. So the first 2 weeks of your cycle, what's happening emotionally is that you want to start things fresh. You want to start with new projects, new ideas. You want to create that. And then the second phase of your cycle is forcing you to finish that and it's forcing you to analyze that and assess that. And all the emotions that come in the luteal phase are actually the truest emotions you will ever feel. And they're not being hijacked by estrogen that pretends that everything's okay. And so a lot of women think that the luteal phase is the phase that they want to write it off because I'm going to feel so emotional. I'm going to feel all the things. But actually, it's true emotion. It's the most truest that you will feel. And if it doesn't feel good, it's because you have to assess it. So if you feel dissatisfied about your job, it's not because you're in the luteal phase. It's because that's true. So you want to start like, why do I feel dissatisfied about my job? Am I not getting, the promotion? Am I not feeling like I'm being challenged? Like assess that and then make decisions to course correct for the next cycle. And this is how you keep momentum in your life with your goals, is actually using your menstrual cycle to propel you to get there faster. And I get it that this sounds weird because even when I first started learning about this, I'm like, there's no way like it can be this easy. But when you tap into it, the wisdom is there. Like you have a cycle for a reason, not just for you to create a baby. There's so many million ways that the cycle affects every organ of the body. And so it affects your brain that way to help you move forward faster in life. So that's very two distinct ways of looking at the cycle. And I think this could help.
I've got to be careful how I word this, but it's like kind of like you're impairing your ability to think like purely rationally, I guess, because would you say that's true in terms of you're
Yep.
more clear and focused, and there's less hormones affecting your decision making and your thinking in the second half of the phase compared to the first?
Okay, so yes and no. What is changing there is that you have more of this happy hormone floating around. Serotonin is more dominant because of estrogen. So because you have more of this happy neurotransmitter in the first half of your cycle, there's some things that you could brush off that it's like, oh no, it's okay, that's fine. But when estrogen is no longer there, you're like, this is not fine. We need to do something about it. And so I think that to what you were saying, that is correct. It's like the second half of the cycle is really where you want to tap into that truth of feelings and really listen deep instead of like listening more to the feelings of the ovulatory phase, which are kind of just wanting for you to, you know, feel fantastic and find a mate. So yeah, in a way, like what you said is true, but it's not necessarily like more rational. It's more like if you want the real truth, deep truth of the feeling, wait until you get to the luteal phase to make sure that it's there, and then make your decision about it. For example, if you want to make a big decision about career change, if you want to make a big decision about your partner, don't try to make it in the ovulatory phase. I mean, you can, but see if that same thing comes across in the luteal phase. If the same decision is still there, or you would change that up.
You've obviously described roughly the menstrual cycle and how your body changes and responds to different circumstances in that. But one of the things that you share, which I think is probably one of the most significant things that you do, is unpicking the fact that we well not we because I'm not a woman, but as a woman you're not supposed to have the level of symptoms or even any symptoms at all that we've grown to associate with either PMS or during menstruation in terms of acne, tender breasts, bloating, cramps, irritation, all these kind of things which I've heard are so common. And as you described earlier in the podcast, it was common to people around you. So it's like, why would I question it? This must be normal, right? But you've obviously gone on to say that these things aren't normal and that in fact these things can be completely eliminated. So work that one out for me because that's definitely something which surprised me as I followed your page.
So let's get something straight. None of what you said is part of a menstrual cycle. None of those issues are meant to come up. You're not meant to feel bloated. You're not meant to have tenderness in your breasts. Acne is not meant to show up. You're not meant to feel moody. You're not meant to have crazy cravings. You're not meant to feel fatigued and tired. None of that is meant to exist. But then, like, even within my girlfriend group, I was like, oh, I'm feeling so bloated today. Like, I'm getting my period soon. And the other girlfriend says, oh, me too. Boom, just normalize it. Oh, all my friends have it. Of course I'm gonna feel bloated. Of course I'm gonna feel moody. Of course I'm gonna feel. And what I'm challenging women is with the thought or the upgrade thought of actually this is the result of an imbalance. This is a result of a gut issue. This is the result of something is not working. And I need to turn on the healing button, heal that up, and then in my next menstrual cycle, I'm not gonna be bloated. And that's the idea. Your body is never meant to imagine nature creating a whole human body and deciding for 2 weeks of every month for the rest of your life, for almost 40 years of your life, so almost half of the whole year, every year, you're going to be struggling. You're going to have pain. You're going to feel like crap. Imagine nature creating something like that. It makes no sense. And so your cycle is meant to have no symptoms. The only thing that is more normal is to feel some commotion. So if you're getting close to your cycle and feeling like definitely your emotions are going inward and that you're feeling some dissatisfaction about life, normalize that, but with knowing that you have to decipher why that is coming. So get deeper to that emotion. That is what is offering you. Maybe you feel maybe some heaviness in the uterus area, and that may give you a sign, but no symptoms of discomfort, nothing that removes quality of life. That is the point. Like, you shouldn't be complaining about anything. Point made.
Well, I've heard that cramps are your body's way of simulating the pain of childbirth in some sense. Is that not true?
No. No, cramps are literally most of the times an omega-3 imbalance or not enough omega-3s in the body. So it's almost most of the times a nutrition problem. Other times it can be because you have a big cyst in your ovary or because you have tissue growing in the uterus that shouldn't be there. Those are more complicated chronic issues that have developed with a long time, for a long time, sorry. But yeah, pain is something that can be easily fixed for most of us because it's mostly a nutrition issue. But it can also be emotional. Let me tell you that. It can also be emotional. If you've done everything and nothing works, get into what type of trapped emotion do you have? Let's talk about your life.
And so, do you think there's a lot of these issues also come a result of suppression of how we feel?
Yeah. I mean, why do we think that we have so much chronic issues at such young ages now? Like we are seeing issues that we like 50 years ago we would only see in a 19-year-old. We have it at 20, at 15, 17. We are, because also I must say, like a big change for us women was also the industrialization of things and the fact that we had to deal with so much environmental toxins. The fact that a woman has a morning routine that exposes her to more than like 250 chemicals brings a huge burden into the body. And guess what? Those chemicals not meant to stay there, and they bioaccumulate, they stay there, and they create more issues.
One thing I've also heard, and not to get too conspiratorial, but my current joke with my girlfriend is that I don't want to touch receipts because receipts have like estrogen, endocrine receptor disruptors, or something. I'm just spewing out words. I'm sure you could clarify, but there's just so many things in our environment which we can downplay, but ultimately there's an accumulation of toxicity and man-made products. And actually, if our skin is an organ and everything we're ingesting is being somehow filtered by our organs, then over time that's got to be affecting our brain chemicals, our hormonal cycles of women, and that kind of thing.
I really want to touch on that receipt issue. It's because guess who's touching receipts more often? Like women. Most people who work behind the grocery store, as an employee, are women. Plus, who's going to shop more for the family are women. So women are also in more contact with receipts. But yes, those receipts are a huge problem. Why? Because there is a specific chemical, BPA, bisphenol A, which is an endocrine disruptor. Then when you touch it, it immediately transfers into your skin and you absorb it. It's very fast, and the exposure is from one receipt is insane. I think that I might be saying this a little bit wrong, but it's closer to what I'm about to say. You touching one receipt, the exposure to BPA would equal you drinking water from a bottle of water the entire year. You drinking water from a plastic bottle of water the entire year. That's a big difference, right? So I would recommend everyone, if you don't need the receipt, thank you very much. Don't need it, trash it. Ask them to trash it. And if you need to have it, ask the person to put it inside your bag. When you get home, take the receipt, put it where the other receipts are, wash your hands immediately, and that's how you minimize your exposure. It makes a huge difference.
Other than, I guess, the obvious ones like processed foods
Yep.
and microwave meals and things like this, are there any major examples of our environment which you could say is disrupting both male and female hormones, although obviously more specifically female hormones because it's slightly more complicated?
So two things that you can quickly change in your lifestyle, I think is the easiest one to change, is pesticides and your tap water. So pesticides are being sprayed in every single crop out there just because that's how they grow faster. They need more yield in less time to sell more. So for sure, you want to try your best to buy what's organic, what you can afford organic. So if you have something that you're constantly buying and is a staple in your house, and you know that you're eating it every day, go for the organic version. You really need to lower the burden of pesticides in your day to day. But also, your tap water has everything that you can think in it, from your neighbor's drugs to your neighbor's paint wall to your neighbor's whatever he ate that has pesticides. It all goes down to the water and it comes into your tap water, because the filtration systems of almost every country are rudimentary. All it does is remove E. coli, other potential viruses and bacteria that could kill you. It does not remove pharmaceuticals. It does not remove industrial chemicals. It does not remove makeup, paints, whatever. It all comes in your tap water. And for example, if you have a skin condition, you can see it ease by maybe changing the shower filter in your shower. And you can buy like a very affordable, like twisty thing that you can just put into your shower filter and have that be cleaner water. But especially tap water, if you're drinking tap water, you want to either get a filter in your house or buy from. I highly recommend getting a filter, because even when you buy plastic water from the supermarket, it still has plastic in it, even though we don't think it does.
I was going to say, it's like, well, if the alternative to not drinking tap water is buying store-bought water, but you've just said that the plastic bottles. So I guess I've heard people use like reverse osmosis filters in their
Yeah,
taps. And like you say, the shower one isn't something I've ever considered, but
yeah.
this is going to, I think after this conversation, I'm going to have to go on Amazon and go full biohacking mode and purchase all this stuff. And I guess really the question becomes, to what extent can we do these things where practical and possible? Because
Yeah,
ultimately we can't, well, you can, but you can't completely run away from civilization and go and run on, live on a farm 1,000 miles away. So
exactly.
there's some extent to which we need to engage with civilization. And so I guess the question becomes, is it practical and possible? Yeah, you probably could put a reverse osmosis filter. You probably could buy organic vegetables. You probably could cut down on processed foods and stop using makeup, which is full of all these chemicals. But there's still going to be some levels of trade-off. But let's do those things first,
Yeah.
and then we can talk again, I guess, and you can see if your symptoms have increased or decreased.
I was about to say, like, actually, a great thing about living in a world full of businesses and everyone's trying to do the best thing is the demand creates opportunity for things that are better for you. So, for example, the makeup that I have on my face today is low tox makeup. Not ideal, there's toxins in there, but compared to the makeup I used to wear 10 years ago, it's like 80% change in the amount of things that go into my body. I only use makeup maybe once a month or maybe once, whatever, twice. So it's reducing the amount that you're exposed as well. Um, but there are tons of companies that are making low tox makeup. There are tons of companies that are making low tox face creams or shampoos, because it's literally about the bigger picture. I think that's something that people do bring that argument a lot, like like I'm gonna live in society, like I'm not gonna live in the forest in the middle of nowhere. I'm like, you're right, same. I'm not gonna go and do that, but that doesn't take away of the danger. So you definitely, because you live in this society, need to know about it, and so you just need to start making that change little by little. So if the first thing is finding better makeup, great. Once you're done with that, look at the next thing that you can do. If the first thing is changing your tap water, amazing. And then move on to the next thing. Just choose one thing. And let me give you a, uh, a little number that can help you understand that just one small change can help a lot. They put, like, I think it was autistic children. Yeah, autistic children in a conventional diet, and the other group was in a non-GMO organic diet. And just within 7 days of changing that, the autistic group that did the organic non-GMO, they had incredible results in behavior. So no tantrums, no like what's the word I'm looking for? No uncontrollable behavior that they used to have a lot. So for parents, whoever is with these children, it's almost like an ease in their life. And that's just with them. And then they did like other studies where they removed, for example, they tested one pesticide, and the reduction of that pesticide also from 7 days went, it lowered in the body by 70% or something like that, just with 7 days of taking that out. So one little small change goes a long way in the body, because the amount of toxins you are exposed to is insane. So taking that step by step, like within 3 years, you have a complete low tox life, and you're guaranteeing that like later on, you're not getting like these issues of inflammation such as Alzheimer's, cancer, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, like come to you earlier. So it's about doing the work now and acknowledging that just like you are living in an industrial world, you have to take responsibility for it. You can't just be pretending these things aren't happening.
In terms of convenience and convenient solutions, particularly with women's cycle, for contraception or not, the pill has been one of those things which I've seen so widely talked about, yet such little education on. But from my perspective, that's not working with your body. That's just kind of putting on a bandage that is eventually going to lead to your body not being able to regulate its own hormone cycle. And so, what's your experience been like with the pill and with those that you work with, and what are your general thoughts on oral contraception?
Yeah, the pill is one of those things that it became a huge problem because it went from I don't want to get pregnant, let me use the pill, to let me start giving the pill to everyone that has any complaint about their cycle. It became a standard medication for that when it was never meant to be used for that. And, when I was first given the pill, no one read me the side effects. No one told me that. And I was having most of them. But then again, like, just normalize it. Um, and also, the pill does not fix an issue. Like you said it perfectly. It puts a band aid on top of it. It will hide it for as long as you're taking birth control. When you come off birth control, those issues will come back to you with vengeance. They will come back to you, and you will be struggling, and you wish they never get off the pill, and probably you'll get back into. So, like, you're on this vicious loop, but then you're never going to heal the actual problem. So, to anyone out there who's on birth control and you're on it not for birth control, you definitely want to consider going deeper into the why you went on it, and then work on those issues and slowly prepare the body to come off birth control, because you don't need it for those issues. Just go into the healing part. And then with my clients, for example, the experience that I have with them is a lot of them have mental health issues because of the pill. A lot of them have difficulty with their exercise routines because of the pill. Um, there's an amazing book that I recommend everyone, especially women, reading, but men too, which is What the Pill Does to the Brain, or How the Pill Changes the Brain.
Is that Sarah Hill?
Yeah, it's mind blowing to know that. And the thing is, I was on birth control for 10 years before I even read that book, before I even knew any of this. So people are on birth control for decades. And this has a long term effects that weren't even studied yet. So, what are the long term effects on fertility? What are the long term effects on your sexual desire? It does change it. And those who defend that it doesn't change, they have business with a pill, let me tell you. Again, not to go like conspiracy, but like there is a world where that exists.
Whether it's intentional or not, it's still the consequence of the system where we don't have the time to holistically address the issues, and it's easier to put on that solution. And I find it interesting you mentioned that book, because Dr. Sarah Hill is someone who I'd also like love to have a conversation with at some point. I think something she says is that for women who are on the pill and then come off of it, sometimes they can like lose attractiveness in their partners because they select for partners with lower testosterone, and then when they're not on the pill, they realize they can like almost like smell it, like the like the testosterone on a man, right? And I think that's so insane when I hear that.
Yeah.
That's something that you found in any of your work.
So I always say this: never go against what someone's telling you is their experience. And this is what I find the problem with so many doctors that say this is not true, this is not real, blah, blah, blah. But all of these women are having the same experience. They are the result of the experience. They were the ones that were on the pill for a decade, came off the pill, and they all had the same exact experience. They found their husband's smell to be disgusting. They no longer feel attracted to them. There is something to look within that. I always validate where my client is experienced. And if that's the result that they're having, I validate that that's the result that the pill does or gives the person. Again, it might not be everyone, but this is happening with big quantities. Like, there's so many women speaking about the same effect going off the pill. And so at that book, I think this is why I want people to like go properly read the book, and you will probably find validation in your feelings too, because again, it's coming from someone who investigated it. She wrote a book entirely about how the pill changes in your brain, and to validate your feelings pretty much.
And I find it interesting how um, symmetrical that issue is with, it's not just a problem of women's hormones, but also male hormones and testosterone being far lower as a result of our environment and our habits and our actions. And actually, those two things coming together doesn't work at all, because if men's testosterone is half of what it was 50 years ago, and then women on the pill aren't able to determine that, then we're all lost. Whereas, if men are more aware of the importance of sleep and proper nutrition and not being exposed to toxins in their environment and all this kind of stuff,
Yeah.
and then women are not on the pill, then you'd have happier, healthier, more in sync with our nature relationships. And I think that's just something to consider, because I don't think we hold hormones to as high esteem as we should do, or at least at least when I have conversations generally, it's always about behavior modification on the surface level. But actually, as this whole conversation has alluded me to, is that actually we should be going all the way to the root level and looking at our biology and looking at our hormones that inform the behaviors that kind of come onto the surface.
100%. I couldn't agree more. We have forgotten about like the only reason why we function is because we have a body. We can't forget about it. We have to pay attention to it and not pretend that we're both the same. And that really, really annoys me, that we're both trying to fit in the same box. Um, and even with partners, like if we can just touch on that, if a woman is fully embodied in her cycle, her partner will feel much deeper fulfillment with her. So the potential cycle syncing has in a relationship is humongous, because it allows the couple to feel safer in the relationship. It allows the couple to feel more understood. It allows the men to be like, I know how to take care of my woman. I know how to provide for her. I know what she needs emotionally in this phase. I know what she needs socially in this phase. And guess what? When we receive that way, we let go of our guard completely, and we are like so much more like connected to you guys. Like I've experienced this with my husband, where there was so much resistance in our relationship, even sexually, and me finally understanding my body, understanding my desire and how that changes, and normalizing the change really got us to a place that we feel super secure in the way that we interact with each other in the different phases. And he's not blaming me. He's not like, why are you like this? Because I finally got it. It clicked. And so it clicked for him too. So I always tell women, like, this is obviously for you to truly like empower yourself in who you are, but whoever is around you will find that there's tons of benefits for them too.
And not to take it fully into the domain of relationships, but something I often hear about online is just the importance of men and women working together, complementing one another, not being the same, and that there is that need for some sense of polarity in terms of masculinity and femininity, and leaning into biologically who we're sort of made to be. And so, given everything that you've shared about leaning back into our hormones and our biology and working with our bodies rather than against them, what, and I guess this is a bit more of a philosophical question, but what does it actually mean to be, in your eyes, a feminine woman, given everything that society tries to tell women in one direction or another?
Okay, I love that, because I figured that out for me. So obviously, I'm going to come from what it means to me, and it can mean something different to everyone else. For me, being a woman, being embodied in both of my masculine and my feminine, is knowing when to give the percentage of what it needs to come out. So, for example, in my partnership, like there's a day where I'm only being able to show up 20%, and I'm more in my feminine and less in my masculine. And I come to my partner, I was like, how much percentage do you have today? And he's like, I got 10. I was like, okay, we can work with that. I'm going to have to be a little bit more masculine today. But the other days, it changes. And I really feel embodied in that, because my feminine energy and my masculine energy really show up the way they need to and when they need to. And also in my cycle, I know when masculine shows up more and when I dominate with that, and when feminine shows up more and I dominate with that. I feel like it's just being able to fluctuate with what you need daily, and not feeling like you have a strict way of behaving. Like flowing with who you are is really what like I feel like being a woman is, and not being ashamed or scared of being in a different energy daily, and having to adapt to what your partner also has, and being okay to show up more one day, show up less one day. I feel like that's just the perfect balance for me.
Are there trends in terms of when that is in the cycle, and when women feel like they have to be more masculine, or maybe they don't even feel like they have to be more masculine, but
They just
they
are,
are?
yeah. Yes. I think there's always a need for feminine energy all day, every single day of your life. And what I mean with feminine energy, how I see feminine energy is nurturing, supporting, self care, tending. That is what feminine energy is. It's more a group thing, is more a support thing, is more a taking care of yourself thing. And so when you really need to tap into that is the luteal phase and the menstrual phase. That is the phase that your body is screaming for you to be more in your feminine. In your follicular and ovulatory phase, your body is screaming for you to just be on the go, socialize, be selfish, have fun. And that's when the masculine energy just show up like naturally. That's what it looks like in a cycle. But then again, I think every woman needs to tap into what they feel good with and what is their experience, because no woman has the same cycle. We all have different cycles in terms of length. So that means that maybe someone has a really short follicular phase, a really short ovulatory phase, or maybe a really long luteal phase. So we're all kind of tapping into how long we need these energies for. And that's up to you to recognize by first starting to track your cycle, understanding how long you are in these phases. Once you get into the flow, it's like, okay, I'm in this phase, I'm in the next phase. Then you really start syncing small things. Maybe start with nutrition, then maybe start with exercise because that's just easy. And then start understanding the more complexities of the emotions that come in those phases and support the emotions.
And coming to support, I guess our whole conversation hopefully has been interesting for men and women listening, and particularly useful for women. But in terms of the guys who may be listening to this podcast, the question I kind of wanted to come into the end of the podcast with is, what can men do, both in terms of when they are single with their female friends or with family members who are women, but I suppose particularly with their in their relationships or in their marriages, what can men do to support and enable and help alongside women in this journey of understanding more about their own body and cycle, and also just knowing then how to give care and respond to things in different ways. I mean, I know we touched on it briefly, but in terms of a general prescription towards men, what would you say?
Yeah. I think it's important for men to also want to be curious and want to understand their partner and their friends, and understanding that the woman that you have in front of you will change every time that you're with her. Like, we don't wake up in the morning thinking exactly the same as the day before. And how you can support us best is by asking questions on how I want to receive, and starting to also memorize some specific things about certain parts of each phase of the cycle, especially if you're in a relationship. If you're not in a relationship, okay, it's a bit harder to get there. But if you are in a relationship, it's also encouraging your partner to share more of how she feels differently with you throughout those phases. Like, what are you noticing that you need more in this phase? Or what are you noticing that we could do more in this phase? Or how would you like to receive more of my support this phase? For example, let me bring it up to me, because that's what I can say with confidence with my partner is, I always tell him, I'm going to my luteal phase. I'm about to want to be with my own energy a little bit more. I'm about to want to feel a bit more safer in my environment, because things could trigger me a bit easier. He knows that, for example, if he wants to have fun socializing with me somewhere, that's not going to be the late luteal phase. So he's not about to suggest, let's go out for dinner with friends today. He knows that, like, I'm not going to receive that well, and I'm going to feel weird that I don't want to do it. So it's about getting to a point where you fully understand the woman in the cycle too, by asking her questions. I don't expect you to know anything. It needs to come out of her mouth too. So just be curious, ask more questions, support her the way she needs. Also know that if she asks for alone time, it's important for her. She's not trying to avoid you. She needs to recover, re-energize, so that can show up for you too. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Really, what you're describing is just healthy, open communication
Communication.
rather than making assumptions in any direction. And I would hope that someone listening would take that advice and apply it broadly as well, and just communicate your own feelings and needs, and be open to receiving that from the other person. In general in life as well, I think, communication is so important so that we can best serve people. And it's never awkward or weird to ask uncomfortable or have uncomfortable conversations, because once you have them, once you understand and grow in connection and understanding, you're better able to serve that person and to work with them rather than be confused or falling to, especially with this issue that we're talking about, fall into, I think, a lot of popular culture which trivializes a lot of issues and belittles men and women in terms of a lack of education, and
Mhm.
can be quite damaging in terms of people's own identity and what they think about themselves. So I think open communication and understanding and a curiosity is everything, which I've been trying to do during this conversation.
Yes.
And I hope that anyone listening to this has really taken some fantastic little nuggets away and can use to implement. But if people want to go a little bit deeper on this topic and they want to understand a little bit more about themselves, maybe they've been experiencing some of the symptoms that we spoke about earlier, or maybe they've got a partner and they're struggling, um, where would you point them? And also, would you like to share when people can contact you?
I think for women, I think it's important that you start just maybe following a couple of accounts that talk about cycle syncing and see how different women sync their lifestyles to their cycle, because there's variety, there's different desires. Check that out. Like get your eyes into that, because the more you look at it, the more you're like willing to like, okay, maybe I could actually start doing that. That's how I also started. Um, and then I highly recommend couples actually, if you're in a couple, if you are in a partnership, even if it's it doesn't have to be hetero. It can be two women, a guy and a man, a guy and a woman. I highly recommend that you tap into this documentary, or this documentary style called Sex, Love, and Goop, because in that documentary you can understand the layers of complexity energetically for the female and male body that can really connect you guys deeper. And I know this is really random, we really didn't talk about this, but like I find that to be like, I still have deep conversations about my partner from that documentary. It still to this day amazes me what I saw there. So I highly recommend that. And for men to just, again, you don't have to necessarily go look yourself the information. You can, and you probably everyone would love you for that. But just be more curious, ask more questions, try to understand the females around you. Like, just tell them, like, I would love to understand this more. Like, would you mind me asking just random questions that like could be obvious? And go for that. And also, I would have tons of books to recommend for for women. I think that if you're on birth control, definitely read the one that what the pill does to the brain. If you want to learn more about cycle syncing, go for In the Flow by Elisa Vitti. If you want to learn more about how to get rid of complex symptoms, also read the book Woman Code by Elisa Vitti. She explains really well like the simple lifestyle changes that you can make and really help someone. What other? Sorry, I'm looking there because I actually have all my books there. Someone recommended me one book that is powerful in the way women see themselves in society, and it's called Pussy by Regina Thomas Hauer. Highly recommend that. Highly recommend that one too.
Cool. And then if people want to contact you, where can they do so?
Oh, they can contact me anywhere. So Instagram is Instagram, Facebook. You can find my website, drmariatedim.com, and I respond everywhere. Email. Yeah.
Cool. And that'll all be linked in the show notes. Well, thank you very much for this conversation. I appreciate your time and your expertise, and hopefully I didn't make too much of a fool of myself with my line of questioning. And I've definitely learned a lot in the last hour, and I hope everyone else has too. But
Yes.
thank you very much for your time.
Yes, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.